Alright, you are live. Okay.
So we're live?
Yeah.
And have you copied the link?
I'm going to do that right now. I'll be able to view it in here, I think. And I'm going to post to the...
Hi everybody, we're just figuring out a few little technical difficulties here. Turns out YouTube doesn't make it very easy to move from one device to another. But for anybody watching, we will be there very, very soon.
It is live now.
So that now.
Mm-hmm.
Right, apparently you're all watching. This is great. Okay, so we had a few technical issues there. Right, it looks like we're live. So hello ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining us on this little live experiment. Hopefully it's going to be fun. Yeah, we'll see how this goes. As normal, I'm going to be doing my best to answer some of your questions that you guys have sent me. Will,
Hi guys.
colleague here, you may recognise this voice from the Surfing Explained series.
Yeah.
You may recognise this face from the Icons surfboards thing that he's been doing recently.
Yeah.
Will is going to be my wingman here. He is going to be fielding your questions that you're sending in through the comment stream and feeding them to me. And Will is also going to be my fact checker because, yeah, obviously I'm not necessarily going to be able to look up any information that I don't have stored away in my brain. We haven't connected the microphones. Hold on one second, ladies and gentlemen. The sound is probably a little echoey. We're just going to connect the microphone up and hopefully.
Check. Check. Perfect.
Sounds good. Jolly good. Right, as you can tell, this is the first time we've done this sort of thing. So, yes, I have my markers, I have my whiteboard, I have my tree of knowledge. So, send me your questions. Let me know if we've got any yet.
We have our first question, Tony O'Neill. What is the trick to getting deeper underwater during a duck dive?
All right, yes. So Tony actually asked me this in the water the other day as well. But, what you want to be doing. Duck diving is an interesting skill. It's something that a lot of people push themselves towards, and obviously it's a method for getting a smaller board to dive underneath a bigger wave, which makes paddling out a lot easier. The two mistakes that I see people make a lot is, number one, really focusing on getting as deep as you possibly can underneath the water, and when we do that, it causes some problems with the technique. And the other one is waiting until too late, and basically duck diving as the wave's already hitting you, whereas you kind of want to be underwater when that happens. So let me just get this tree of knowledge out of the way. And so let's have a wave coming in, and it looks a little bit like this, standing up. Whoop, there we go. Standing up and breaking. And as we're paddling towards it as a surfer, there's two things that we want to do. And explaining duck diving in a video format like this is going to be tricky. But the two things that we really want to do is we want to get the board down underneath the water. But there's a lot of people really try to push the board very deep, and what that results in is the board being in this sort of attitude. Okay, and at this point it's very difficult to control the board properly. Okay, those are very sensitive.
Yeah, I've been told to turn mine down a little.
You're too noisy.
Yeah. Keep going, you go.
Okay, so yeah, we end up in this sort of attitude, and it's very difficult to control, because what's going to happen is as soon as you push the surfboard underwater, the board's own buoyancy is going to try to lift it back up to the surface. Okay, and if we're in this sort of attitude, then what's going to happen is that the board is going to try to come back up to the surface in this direction. which is going to look remarkably inelegant and isn't going to be a very efficient way of getting the board underneath the water. So the solution here is that you want to get really, really comfortable at sitting, we call it hovering the board. What you're basically going to do is you're going to get your hands on the rails, you're going to get a foot on the tail, and you're going to push the board down horizontally and just hover over the top of the board. And the board's own buoyancy is going to try and float the board back up. And it's going to fight you and trying to get out from underneath you. And you just need to get comfortable to where you can sit and hover over the top of the surfboard for like 30 seconds. With no problems at all. And obviously the bigger the board, the more it's going to fight you, the harder it's going to be to stay over the top of it for 30 seconds. But doing that will teach you to control the board through this problem here. Okay, and obviously what we really want is for the board to go nose down and then for us to be able to get the board horizontal again underneath the water. This would be a very deep duck dive before then resurfacing once the waves passed us by. But the real skill that you actually need to learn is not how to push the board really, really deep underwater, because that will come kind of all by itself the more that you practice it. The skill is keeping the board under control and not letting the buoyancy pull you out backwards or pull you out sideways or anything like that. And what I see most people doing is just rushing. Okay? And because they rush, the technique isn't very good, the board wins the fight and they lose control of it. Now the second thing that happens is you do, as you push the board down, you are going to end up with the nose down and with your bum pushed up into the air. And if the wave, let's say that this wave has actually broken and it's white water, okay, and it's running in towards us, most of the energy of a broken wave is on the surface like this. But if your bum and the board are sticking up out of the water, then as that white water hits it, it's definitely going to push you back. It's definitely going to cause you to lose control. So we want to be in this position here as the wave passes us by. And what that means is that you're almost always better off duck diving a little bit earlier than a little bit later. If you duck dive like 1 second early, that's better than duck diving half a second late. And what most people do is they're paddling towards the wave and this wave's coming towards them, it's getting bigger and bigger and it looks kind of nervous, and there's an instinct to kind of wait until the last minute to try and start that duck dive. And I would definitely just suggest starting a little bit earlier, and that'll get you underwater and in this position, which means that you won't get beaten up and thrown around. And of course, you will be in the deepest part of that duck dive when the wave's passing you over, which is helpful. The final thing is this. A board will have, you're basically pushing the board through an arc. You're going nose down, tail down, nose up. Okay? And the board, as you do that, what we effectively do is we push the nose down with our arms, and then we use our foot to push the tail through the rest of the arc. Okay? And there's basically a fixed speed that you can push the tail down through. Water is uncompressible. The water has to get out of the way of the tail. The bigger the board, the longer the board, the slower the board's going to go through that arc. And again, one of the mistakes I see is when people are learning, they've seen video of people doing it on tiny little twiggy shortboards and going, and they try to do that on, a relatively big mid-length surfboard, and they just kick their foot straight off the tail. So you want to learn, again, on flat water, just learn to push the board through the arc and feel how long it takes to. You can just keep your head above the water and just push, nose down, push the tail through the arc with your head above the water, and just see how long that takes. And then build that into the timing for learning when you want to start the duck dive, so that you're at this point as the wave passes over your head, not at this point, or at this point. Cool. Hopefully that answered the question. Have you got another one for me, William?
Yeah, your drawings and explanations don't disappoint. So from Jay Bernard, thank you for your question. The question is, do you have any advice for someone who might get their feet caught during a pop-up, like their feet dragging during a pop-up?
All right, this is a very timely question. So for listeners that don't know this, I busted my ankle about a month ago, about 6 weeks ago, and it's my front ankle, and it's not the first time I've done it. So this is a sort of reoccurring thing. And both times when I've been recovering from this ankle injury, it's my front ankle that isn't very good. And as I pop up at the moment, I went out for a surf yesterday, and as I'm popping up, I'm doing something with my back foot and my toes are getting caught. And it's really painful. So I can completely sympathize with this problem. And I did the same thing the last time I injured this ankle. When I went back in the water, I was doing the same thing. And I assume what I'm doing is modifying my technique. This is all happening very quickly in the water, but I think I'm modifying my technique of my pop-up to try to protect my front ankle and my, that weaker leg. And it's causing me to drag the toes of my back foot along the board and bend them in weird directions that they probably shouldn't be bent in. So how do we solve this? Well, the first thing is it your front foot or your back foot that's getting caught? The classic one is it's the front foot that's getting caught on the surfboard. And the biggest cause for that one, weirdly, is your head looking down at the surfboard. If your head's looking down at the surfboard, it's going to change. It has repercussions all the way through the rest of your body. And the big one is that you're likely to push your hips backwards and up into the air. And it weirdly makes it very, very difficult to get your front foot through the gap. We sometimes call it a gate or a door that you create kind of between the deck of the board and your arms and your chest. And you're trying to get your knee to go through that gate. And when you have your head looking down, that is almost impossible. So first things first, head up. And not just head up, but find a target, find a positive, a tree, a building, a house. If you're a more advanced surfer and you're angling down the line, you want to be looking at the lip of the wave down the line, and don't take your eyes off that target. And that will make a big difference with the foot coming through. The second one is making sure your hands are coming behind your shoulders. It's much easier to push up. You finish paddling, you put your hands on the deck of the board. It's much easier to put them level with your head or your shoulders. The push-up will be much easier, but the problem is your hips won't come off the deck of the surfboard. And again, that's going to reduce the size of the gate that you're trying to get your knee through. If you can bring your hands behind your shoulders, it gets better. If you can get your hands to your waist, below level with the bottom of your rib cage, that will make the gate as big as it possibly can be for getting that foot through. Now, when you bring your hands back, it can be sometimes a bit weird to figure out which direction your hands should be pointed, and it honestly doesn't matter. A lot of people worry about whether their fingers are forwards or outwards or inwards or whatever, and it really doesn't matter as long as the hands are just back. That will make life a little bit easier. One good trick is, rather than having your hand flat against the board, is to go up onto the ball of your hand, onto this part here. You can actually lift up like that. Now, you need a reasonably strong wrist in order to be able to do that, but it will give you just an extra few inches. There is also a company called Surf Knobs, who very kindly sent us a bit of their product, and they have it's just a little lump that you put on the deck of the board where your hand is going to go, and again, it just gives you that. It allows you to then have your hand flat rather than up on the ball like that. But it just gives you that little bit of extra height, again, to help that front foot come through. So that's those two things. Now, the back foot is trickier to try to solve, or at least it appears to have been for me, because I'm still catching my back foot at the moment. But in terms of sorting the back foot out, again, it slightly depends on your technique. We spoke in the question time episode. We spoke in the question time episode last week about the importance of the back foot not pointing backwards, which is very, very natural. It's much easier popping up if the back foot's just, the toes are pointed out the tail, but that's not then a very good position to stay in. So as you come up, if you're turning that back foot forwards, then it is possible to catch those toes as that back foot comes through. A really, really nice clean pop, make sure that you've got your knees on the deck of the board. As you're lying down, you're paddling, a lot of times the knees come off the deck, and then when people try to pop up, it's harder for them to get their legs clear to swing in. As soon as the knees are on the board, it just makes everything so much easier in terms of getting that little bit of extra height there. So that's a really big one. Just focusing on, it's not an easy thing to do, but trying to focus on where and when the foot is catching through the pop-ups. As you paddle in, maybe just catch a wave going straight into the beach and just do a pop-up, and just feel where it is, whether it's your back foot or your front foot that's catching. Just feel where it is that's happening, because probably if you're trying to catch a wave and surf, your brain's probably a bit overloaded. You're probably thinking about a ton of different things in that moment, and it might be quite difficult to be aware of exactly where. I know that this is true for my back foot, is that quite often I'm so focused on getting the board going down the line and the first turn that I'm going to do, that actually I only notice that I've hurt my toes when I kick out or I fall off and I'm paddling back out, and I suddenly go, oh, my toes really hurt. So, you know, in fact, what I am intending to do the next time I go in the water tomorrow is to go out and just take off going straight to the beach on a fairly big board, and just try to be aware of where it is that my toes are catching the board, and you know why they're doing that, what angle they're at, and then I can start to sort of problem solve as to what it is I'm doing differently. Like I say, I have a suspicion I know what I'm doing wrong, and I think that I'm trying to protect my front foot and that I'm slightly looking downwards, and that's causing my hip to go back, and it's making it difficult for me to get my back foot through. I'm not sure of that. Tomorrow will be the test. I'll keep you informed, viewers.
Another live broadcast from the beach.
Yeah, indeed. All right, next question.
Next question. So, what impact does the position of the fin on a single fin have in the fin box, forwards or backwards?
Okay, interesting question. Who's that from?
This is from Ray Polito.
Right,
Thank you,
Ray. Okay, so yes, so this is kind of something that's quite unique to longboard surfing. There have been a couple of companies that have tried to introduce this feature to shortboards, but basically you've got the tail of the board like this, okay, and the box the fin can go in, because you know the fins are removable. Longboards actually were the first boards that had removable fins. Longboards had removable fins way before shortboards did. But what we have is this long box like this that we can put the fin into, and you can move the fin normally, unless it's a really, really big fin. There's normally a bit of space that you can slide the fin forwards and backwards on, and it has an effect on how the surfboard feels. Now, the really short, concise version is that the further back the fin goes in the board, the more the board is going to be inclined to surf in a straight line, the more it's going to draw out turns, the more stable it's going to be. You know, if you're starting to cross step and walk forwards, the less likely it is that that tail's going to break out and slide out on you. If we bring the fin forwards in the box, what we're basically doing is we're moving, because the fin is going to probably be the pivot point around which the board's rotating. When we move the fin closer to where our feet are likely to be, because let's be honest, most of us don't walk all the way back to here on a longboard. So if we can move the fin a bit closer to where our foot is, it's going to make it much easier to turn. You know, as we come up and we try to do a nice little pivotal top turn, or we try to tighten up our bottom turn a little bit, it's going to be much easier to do that with the fin further forwards. And it does make a big difference. You know, even just a couple of inches will make a big difference to how the board feels. The downside is we bring that fin forwards, it's going to be a little bit harder for us to keep that rail locked in on the wave. It's going to be a little harder. You know, as you start cross-stepping forwards, the fin, the tail's actually going to be a little bit more likely just to slide out. These are marginal differences, as with so much in surfing. You know, we've spoken about levels, surfing levels before. You know, as you go through level 1, level 2, level 3, a lot of this stuff isn't going to matter too much. You know, as long as the fin is in the box and not in the back of your car, you should be okay. As we get to the back end of level 3 and we're starting to think about linking multiple carving turns on one wave, that's probably about the point where, number one, you'll have the enough experience to be able to feel the differences. And number two, you'll actually have enough free bandwidth. You know, as you're performing these maneuvers, we're not thinking about performing the maneuver, we're thinking about linking them together on the wave, and we'll actually have some free bandwidth to feel the differences in how the board is moving as you move the fin backwards and forwards. One of the things that's really good fun with these is the new fins from FCS, which have the FCS2 system in them, and you can actually, sitting in the water, you can pop the back end out and you can slide them backwards or forwards. and the way they're designed, it's quite hard to like knock them and completely remove them from the board when you're doing this. That's actually quite difficult to do, but to just move them forwards and backwards is relatively easy to do in the water, and you can sort of try catching a couple of waves with the fin right at the front of the box and then move it all the way to the back of the box and catch a few more waves and see if you can feel that difference. Like I say, there were a couple of companies. Lockbox had it. Did Official have it as well? There were a couple of companies that tried to make shortboard fins where you could move them backwards and forwards in the box as well, with a similar sort of idea of changing the way the board felt. Yeah, none of those really took off.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ray, for that question. We've got two questions that are similar, so I'll kind of phrase them where they're connected. They're from cillmacd and Maurice Sampson. What might indicate the time to go to a lesser volume board? Okay, yeah. So this is something everybody wants to do. Everybody's always quite keen to... everyone's always quite keen to get onto a shorter board. There is a certain amount of status that we put on ourselves that, a smaller and smaller board kind of equals a better and better surfer. First of all, I don't think that's particularly true. You only have to look at surfers like Harrison Roach that ride these big boards almost solely. Devon Howard. These guys are super talented. So don't put pressure on yourself to drop down a board because it's some sort of symbol of advancement. If you aspire towards performance shortboarding, then gradually we do want to get onto a smaller and smaller board so that we can start performing some of those maneuvers. The really big thing is the time to step down the board is when the board is the biggest limiting factor in your surfing. There will always be limiting factors within your technique, and there will probably always be certain limiting factors within the surfboard. There is no silver bullet surfboard that does everything perfectly. So, even when you get down onto riding shortboards, one board is designed for slightly different conditions than another board, and as me and Will both know, if you end up with a lot of boards to choose from, you somehow always choose the wrong one. But I guess the point is, what you want to be aware of is as you're improving, you want to be ticking off your techniques and making sure that you're really, really comfortable performing different maneuvers. And then when you're getting to the point that the thing that's really holding you back from doing the maneuver better is that the board is big, then that's a good time to think about trying to do it on a smaller board. When you drop down onto the smaller board, your wave count is potentially going to be affected, and the position of your takeoff is going to be pushed closer to that steep breaking part of the wave. So at each stage that we do that, we want to make sure that we're comfortable with it. And yeah, it's not to say that it's impossible, and you can jump from a 9-foot longboard and you can get onto a tiny 6-foot shortboard, and you will still catch waves, and you will still be able to get to your feet, and you will still be able to sort of get the board maneuvering. And for you as the surfer, it can be really difficult to be aware of whether it's your technique or whether it's the board that's kind of limiting what you're doing. And as coaches, we quite often stand on the beach and we'll see someone surfing, and they'll come in and they'll be saying that I wasn't doing this or I wasn't doing that, and we can kind of see that actually the limiting factor there was that the board was too small. They were just taking off a bit late on the wave. The board didn't have just that inherent glide and momentum in it, and so as soon as they made a slight mistake, that was it. That cost them the ride. And for us on the beach, it's maybe a little easier to see that. So try to get video footage of yourself as well. If you're at a point where you're contemplating spending $500, $600, $700 on another board, spend $50 to get somebody to video you for half an hour and have a little look at that footage and see what you're seeing. And if you're seeing some pretty technically good surfing, and your feet are in the right place and everything like that, then give it a go.
I mean, the other thing, actually, I think I've said this before. I get asked all the time, whether it's by email or in person or whatever, what board should I be riding? Not me, you. People ask me what board they should be riding. And the answer that I always give to people is go and experiment. It's wonderfully easy to get hold of different boards now. You have, most rental shops will have a few surfboards lying around. You've got, what's the rental company that we used in Indo? Fact check for me. Here we go. Waco. I got that. There's a company called Waco where they have like really good quality performance shortboards at various locations around the world. If you're near one of their locations, you can use them. If you've got friends that have slightly smaller boards, see if you can borrow one of their boards for half an hour. Just swap boards for even half of a session. Most rental shops, if you borrow one board, they don't normally mind if you borrow it for a day, and if you come back at lunchtime and swap it for a different one. There's so much about surfboard design that really it just hinges on the subjective feel that you're getting from that board. Like, do you like it or not? And that's the most important thing. And if I know for me, I generally prefer boards that have a little bit more rocker in the tail rather than boards that are very flat in the tail. And I suspect from the boards that you ride, Will, that you're kind of the opposite there, and you seem to quite like flat rockered boards.
Yes, for no reason other than perhaps experience.
Yeah,
almost.
no, it's a subjective thing. The boards that I like, Will probably won't get on with. The boards that Will likes, I might not get on with. It's not to say that either of the boards are bad. It's just they feel different under your feet, and he likes one feeling and I like another. And a lot of times when we're learning to surf, we just don't have enough exposure to different equipment. And I think surfing is actually one of the sports where it's actually quite easy to expose yourself to lots of different types of equipment, and then it's just on you to be kind of aware. Don't just borrow the board, surf it and give it back. Like, take a bit of time to look, has it got more or less rocker? Is it a single concave or a double concave? Is it a curvy or a straight outline? Is it wide? Is it thick? Kind of just make a note of these things, and then once you've surfed 5 or 10 boards, you might start to get a feel for, that's interesting. All the boards that had real skinny rails, I really liked them, and all the boards that had really thick rails, I didn't really like them, and that is going to inform your choice as to what board you might want to actually go and buy. Because certainly I've done it. I when I was younger, and I could only really afford one board at a time, and I definitely had at least one board that just wasn't a very good board, and I had that board for a couple of years, and I didn't know it wasn't a very good board because it was the second board I'd ever owned. So it's only by exposing yourself to more equipment that you can kind of learn these things. Mm-hmm. Not that it was a bad board, but it was, in retrospect, it was a board that I probably wasn't going to like. Right.
Maybe I would have loved it.
You would probably have loved it. Yeah, it's probably in the loft at my parents'.
Excellent. So next question, if you're ready. After a bit of rehydration.
Hit me.
From Javi Pierres. After taking off, sometimes I don't know if to go straight down and then sharply bottom turn, or take off with an angle.
Ooh, good question. Good question. Okay, so there's basically 3 different routes. We need a wave here, don't we? We need a wave. Let's have a wave. Right. Let's do. These are all the sounds you can't normally hear because I fast forward through me drawing. Okay, does that make sense, the wave, to everybody? Can we see that? Braking section, peeling right to left. Okay, so if we are paddling into a wave at this point right here, there are 3 routes that we can take. We can go straight down the front of the wave and then bottom turn and try to come back up and hit the lip. We can angle our takeoff and go down the line, or we could do a faded takeoff across the wave and then hook round in the pocket and surf back in this direction. Now, okay, these are the 3 basic types of takeoff. Now, they're not binary. There's, you know, you can point, we've got a 180-degree arc here between heading back all the way towards the pocket and heading all the way across the wave, and you could pick any of those 180 degrees, and, you know, at some point we're going to go from what we would think of as an angled takeoff to more what we would think of as a straight to the beach, but there's not a hard definition. On our tree of knowledge, when we're talking about angled takeoffs, we differentiate what we call a 30-degree angled takeoff and a 60-degree angled takeoff. And the differentiation there is whether we're going to angle and stay really, really high, or whether we're going to kind of angle but still drop to the bottom of the wave. Now, in terms of choosing what we want to do, and your question was particularly about these two options, either dropping down the front of the wave or angling down the line. The two things that we really want to think about is, number one, how fast is the wave going to peel? Okay, if the wave's going to peel really, really quick across like this, then dropping to the bottom and bottom turning, we're likely to end up left in the white water. Okay, and that's not ideal. Equally, if the wave's going to peel really, really slowly, if this shoulder over here is super, super soft, then an angled takeoff is just going to carry us into that really soft section, and we're either going to have to put in a very fast cutback, or we're going to come off the side of the wave. So that's number one. How fast is the wave going to peel? Number two, what is your first maneuver going to be? Okay, and this is a really, really important thing. Maneuver decision making is a huge box. It's not a huge box, it's a tiny box, but conceptually it is a huge box, which is, where are we? We are down here. We call it maneuver decision making. It's right at the bottom end of level 3. And maneuver decision making is all about looking along the wave, seeing what the section looked like, and trying to pick from your tool bag of maneuvers that you could use, trying to pick the one that's going to fit the section of the wave the best. And you want to be doing this. This is a really big thing that a lot of people don't do, is as you are paddling into the wave, if you are a level 2.5 surfer, if you're at this stage here, you know, level 2, level 2.5, you're paddling into an unbroken wave, but really what you're focusing on is standing up or angling the takeoff and just trying to get the board onto a high line, then that's what you should be focusing on in your head. As we move into level 3 and we're starting to think about performing maneuvers on the wave, this stuff shouldn't really be requiring too much conscious thought. Okay? So try not to think about it too much, and try to be consciously thinking about this. Even at the point that you're lying down and you're paddling into the wave, you want to be looking along, you want to be reading the wave and thinking, am I going to be trying to do a cutback? Am I going to be trying to do a little whitewater climb or a little re-entry off the whitewater? Do I want to be pumping, you know, building speed down the wave? And that decision is going to decide what we're going to be thinking about doing, you know, what maneuver we're going to want to do. And, you know, generally, again, within level 3, the real core component you need to work on all of the level 3 maneuvers is that we just need speed. Okay, and doing an angled takeoff into a high line, whether it's a cutback, whether it's pumping, or whether it's a little re-entry or a floater, having horizontal speed is the core component that we have to build up. So I'd almost always say, for a level 3 surfer, unless this section is really, really soft, you're probably going to be better off angling your takeoff. Now, as we move more into high level 3 and into level 4 surfing, and we're starting to think about pushing these horizontal turns that we've been doing, these horizontal maneuvers, into that more vertical realm, then we start to think about dropping down the wave and coming back up to the top. The really important thing is this maneuver here, okay? This bottom turn, okay, is really, really key to level 4 surfing, okay? You need to have a good bottom turn, and a bottom turn is there are so many moving parts, and it has to be done so well. We've got to shift our weight from our front foot to our back foot. We've got to use compression and extension, and we've got to time all of that perfectly with engaging the rail of the surfboard. If we do all of that correctly, we can come out of this turn with a good trajectory up towards the lip with good speed. If we get any of it wrong, it can send us off in the wrong direction, it can kill all of our speed, we can just bog rail and fall off. So, and at that point, that's it. That's kind of, you know, we're losing out on opportunities to perform maneuvers. So that's why we generally get people to angle their takeoff first and then shift towards doing these bottom turns. If you are thinking, if you're at, you know, this level 4 stage and you're pretty comfortable dropping down and doing a good bottom turn and coming up to the lip, and you're also pretty comfortable angling the takeoff onto a high line, then look along the wave. What's your first turn going to be? Is it going to be a vertical turn in the pocket? In which case, we're going to drop down to the bottom of the wave, set up that bottom turn, come up. Is your first turn going to be a more horizontal little floater or setting up a cutback? In which case, you're probably better off angling the takeoff. The final one, sorry, this is a long answer to this question, but this is a little bit nuanced. The final one is this. When you're at the top of the wave here, okay, if we take this route here, we need to pick up enough speed dropping down the wave to be able to do this bottom turn and come up and still have some speed. And if the wave is too small, you don't have enough gravitational potential energy at this point for it to be worth dropping down the wave face. And I would say that the limit there is about shoulder to head high. If the wave's below shoulder to head high, you're really not going to get very much speed dropping down the front here. And by the time you've done this bottom turn, you're probably going to be a little slow, unless you're a very, very, very high level surfer with a really good bottom turn. If you watch even pro level surfers in small waves, shoulder high and below, they will almost always angle the takeoff and start to pump, because we need to be generating some more speed through rail engagement rather than through releasing gravitational potential energy, because we just don't have any.
Fantastic.
Zach,
Yeah.
you think that answers the question?
I think so.
Sorry, that was a very long. This is one of the dangers you guys are seeing with this live video, is that when left to my own devices, I do tend to ramble on and go off on tangents. So normally when I do my videos, I can sort of think about the questions for a little while and try to give you a more concise answer. But now you're getting the raw, unfiltered rubbish.
Interrupting.
Mm-hmm.
You're being compared with your drawings to Bob Ross. I think that's very generous.
We're going to have some happy little coral on the ocean floor here. Just some happy little coral.
So next question.
Yeah.
This is from Dominic Tombasco. How can you foresee a wave will close out?
Okay, I'm rubbing out my wave, and I kind of still need it here. Let me get rid of these little bits, and we'll redraw it. So good question, yes. And this is very linked into what we were talking about before. Okay, so how to see if a wave is going to close out. Again, there are kind of two things that we need to look at. The most important thing is you're going to look at the way that the line of the wave, the skyline of the wave, if you like, you're going to look at how that runs out. So this red was a horizontal line, and the way that the shoulder just drops away here on this one. Okay, now broadly speaking, if we have this wave here with this one dropping, if we had another wave that looked kind of like this, okay, so and let's get the horizontal line to compensate for my bad drawing. Okay, so you can see on these two waves, this one here has a shoulder that's dropping away. The wave's going from fairly steep to relatively soft, whereas this one is holding all the same height. And it doesn't necessarily, the way I've drawn it, it's fairly steep, but it doesn't have to be. The important thing is it's all the same height. The wave might still be 200 yards out to sea and rolling in towards you, and it's very, very soft, what we might call an A wave. But if it's all the same height, we're kind of expecting basically all of this stuff, all of this bit of wave is going to break at the same time. Okay, any bits of waves that are stood up at the same height will break at about the same time. So all of this is going to go. This one, because it's got this shoulder, is going to go more gently. Okay, so that's the first thing, and this is you know, a fairly obvious difference. In the water, it's going to be a little bit more subtle. Now, the other thing that you want to be aware of is how waves peel or break at that particular beach that you're at. Okay, and I think I've spoken about our A, B, C, D, E, F scale in a previous video, but just as a real quick thing, what we tend to talk about is as a wave comes in towards the beach, it starts off, this is a sideways cut. We have a wave that's just too soft to really stand up and catch. Then it gets a little bit bigger and a little bit steeper, and then a bit bigger and a bit steeper, and then it stands up really quite steep, and then it starts to kind of pitch over and break, and then it's a broken whitewater wave. And we call these A, B, C, D, E, and F. And this is just a way for us as coaches to communicate really quickly the nuances of what we're seeing in the water to other people. Because you know, I'm sure all of you guys have sat in the water and looked at waves, and sometimes it can be really there's a lot of information that's quite hard to explain what it is that you're seeing. So we have this kind of code language that we can use in the water. Now, every single wave goes through this process, and every bit of the wave goes through this process. It goes A, B, C, D, E, F. But at different beaches, it goes through this at different speeds. So for example, here in Playa Guiones in Costa Rica, when it's high tide, the wave takes a long time to go through each stage of this. The wave stands up very, very slowly, and it stands up a bit more, and it stands up a bit more, and it stands up a bit more, and eventually it kind of breaks. As it gets to low tide, it goes through this scale much quicker. And if we go 2 beaches north of here, there's a much steeper beach where the wave comes in, stands up, breaks. Smaller Goldilocks zone where the wave is catchable, but it also means that we need a much more exaggerated, the faster the wave goes through this scale, the more of an exaggerated shoulder we need to see on the wave. So here in Guiones, you could probably still paddle into a wave like this at high tide, you know, nice angled takeoff, nice high line, and you could probably still surf down the line for quite a long way, because it's just going to take, you catch it at a C, it's going to take so long to get D, E, F that you could still surf across it and have a good time. If we went to this other beach further north, because it goes through A, B, C, D, E, F so quickly, even this wave might peel so quickly across that it would be quite hard to catch. So how do we then solve for this? Well, what you're going to do is when you arrive at the beach, you are going to get your board out of the car, you're going to get your wetsuit on, or your board shorts on, or whatever, and then you're just going to sit and watch the waves for 10, 15 minutes. If you've not been there, watch for even longer. You know, just, you know, bring a water bottle along, just sit, watch the waves for a little bit. And what you want to see is you want to be watching how quickly the waves are peeling down the line. When a wave does close out, what did it look like 15, 20 seconds beforehand as it was rolling in towards the beach? When a wave peeled down the line and someone caught it and just went cruising off down the line looking fantastic, what did that wave look like 10, 15, 20 seconds beforehand? So that when you paddle out, you know what it is that you're looking for. Do you think that's
excellent?
Anything you want to add?
No, not at all. That's great.
Alrighty. Next.
From Austin Stevenson, he's talking about riding a surf skate. So the question is, do you feel that there is value in skateboarding? Any transferable skills, particularly when the waves are flat?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I do. Absolutely. I think riding any kind of board, to be honest, is quite useful, whether it's a wakeboard, a snowboard, a windsurf, a skateboard. I think even skiing and things like that are very, very helpful. I think there's a lot of benefit to your brain just being used to the sensation of gliding along while, you know, not completely attached to the ground. So, you know, rollerblading or roller skating as well. There's a lot of the way that you move your body where we kind of have to lean into situations and where we want to sit back from situations and maintaining our balance despite having forward momentum. And all of that cross transfers fantastically. With skateboarding specifically, obviously we've kind of got our feet in a really, really similar position, and the movement of our body can be very, very similar, and especially the surf skates boards like Carver's and Smooth Star, and there's another company that I'm forgetting, but I'll remember it in a second. But all of those boards, they basically got a sort of double pivot on the front truck. So the back truck's like a traditional skateboard truck, and the front one can pivot much more aggressively, and it allows the board to keep all four wheels on the ground but still pivot around the back foot, like a surfboard with fins would do. And there's a lot of translation between surfing and riding those boards. The big problem is when you fall off, it will hurt. I mentioned my ankle earlier in this thing. The root cause of that is falling off skateboards and busting ankles, busting knees. So, you know, if you are training on a surf skateboard, as uncool as it may feel, you know, please do, you know, wrist guards, elbow pads, knee pads, where I would thoroughly recommend, you know, wearing some shoes that are maybe a little higher on the ankle, give you a little bit of ankle support, as someone who has busted both front and back ankles. So yeah, I would recommend all of that. I think when you're practicing these things, again, the really important thing is making sure that the mechanics that you're using are going to translate to surfing. And just as a really quick example of that, with one of the big things, you know, with these surf skateboards is that you can pump them. You can go rail to rail and pump like you were pumping a surfboard. But the problem is the actual physics are very, very different. The reason it works is you're forcing the two wheels of the front truck through arcs. And it means that you can get away with technique that won't work on a surfboard. And one of the things I see people doing with these surf skates a lot is, try and not knock anything over here, but using their upper body to really twist left and right, and it'll work. The board will do this and will accelerate. If you do this on a surfboard, it won't do anything at all. Okay, so you want to make sure when you're controlling these surf skateboards that you're doing it with your lower body. It's your hips, your knees, your feet that are causing the board to do stuff, and not your upper body, your head, your shoulders being thrown into stuff. Okay. The great thing is, you know, getting video of yourself surfing can be quite difficult. There's a lot of logistics involved. Getting video of yourself skateboarding is so easy. You know, just prop your phone up against the curb and just go and do a few turns in front of the camera, and you can then pull that up. You can look at it. You can compare that footage to somebody else, and just seeing how you're using your body is so helpful. So I think surf skates are useful for those two reasons. Number one, because there's a lot of cross-transference of skills, and number two, because it's just a much easier medium to do video feedback in. And you know, we have an online coaching program, and quite a few people, as well as sending me some surf clips, have sent in videos of themselves on surf skates moving around, and we've been able to and you know, you can see how they're using the surf skate and how they're using the surfboard, and there's a lot of similarities, and you can give them drills to go out and do on the surf skate that are going to hopefully fix the things that they're doing in the water.
Great, thank you, Harry. Question number 8 from Flipside Fishing. Are there any techniques or methods for wiping out on shallow reef breaks that you would suggest?
Okay, good question. So when we do occasional trips where we surf over reef, you know, we're very lucky here. We have a very user-friendly beach break here, and this is where we do most of our surfing. But we do trips to other parts of the world. You know, we go out to Indonesia sometimes, and we go to little breaks up and down the coast here, some of which are reef. And falling off over rock is something that people are very, very intimidated by and very scared by. And it doesn't have to be super intimidating. Okay. The first thing to just bear in mind, because a lot of people are very intimidated by surfing over reef, and I say this on a very regular basis. When we think about surfing over reef breaks, we tend to think about, you know, big, heavy barreling waves over very shallow rock and coral. And a lot of reefs aren't like that. Like, a lot of reefs have 5, 6, 7 foot of water over the top of them when they're standing up and pitching. You know, that there are chopus out there that you know, you got 6 inches of water between you and the reef, but those are pretty rare. Most places you go out, you're going to have a couple of feet of water over the rock and the reef. And if you just think about times when you've you know, fallen off the board over sand, and just think about the number of times that you've actually impacted the sand. And it's probably not that often that you're really impacting it. The water does an incredible job at absorbing us falling into it. And you know, unless you fall in a certain way, you're unlikely to really penetrate very deep into the water. So that's the first thing is you know, try not to worry about that stuff too much. That said, there are a lot of reef breaks where if you straighten out and you don't kick off the surfboard quickly, that it does get shallow quite fast, and you can find yourself in, you know, relatively shallow, you know, waist or knee depth water. At which point, you know, when you fall off, there is a risk of hitting the bottom. So if that happens, the best thing to do, there's 2 things. Number one, the tactic that I really like is straighten the surfboard out and let the wave behind you lose a little bit of power. Okay, if we're already in this unfortunate situation, then straighten the board towards the beach, let the wave, you know, break behind us and let it just lose a little bit of its power there. Because if you're surfing over a wave that has got that shallow, that quick, the wave's probably going to use up most of its energy in that initial. And if we can just get past that, the wave will have much less energy. Once that's happened, all we're going to do is we're just going to put all of our weight on our back foot. We're going to slow the surfboard down and stop it. And then as the white water hits us, we're going to fall backwards into it, arms and legs outwards, and just kind of starfish a little bit. And we're doing that specifically so that we don't penetrate. We're sort of trying to lie on top of the water. If you're surfing over really shallow waves like that, I would recommend wearing reef boots, because now that you're in this position and you're being pushed in this direction, the thing that's going to make first contact is probably going to be your feet. Okay, and if you've got reef boots on, again, we don't need to be so concerned about, you know, our feet making contact with something that's a bit harder, a bit sharp. They don't look so cool, but very, very functional. So yeah, reef boots out and just feeling for that. The other thing is, you know, once we've fallen back and we've made contact, try to get arms over the head so that we're kind of covering it. If you're really nervous about surfing over shallow water, if you think that, you know, wiping out hard on shallow reef, wear a helmet. You know, again, they might not look super cool, but very, very functional. You know, there are not a lot of other sports where we would consider going 20 miles an hour over hard, sharp surfaces and not be wearing, you know, impact protection. And for some reason, surfers, we don't wear it. So a helmet is a good idea. So that's if you're in the situation where you're sort of inside of white water, then that's the best thing. Straighten out, fall backwards into the white water. Try to lead with your feet, so it's your feet going down rather than any other bits of your body. Don't fight to, you know, stay above the water or anything like that. Just let the water roll with you. Try to protect the head. If you're still out on the open face of the wave, and you know you're falling, that's going to be a much less controlled scenario, and you're probably not going to be able to do very much in terms of you know, controlling how or where you fall. So just make the priority, again, protecting your head. If you're falling off over shallow reef, what you want to do is get both hands onto the back of your head here, okay, and you're going to use the elbows here, so now nothing can really get at my face, okay. I'm pulling my elbows in. It's not like this, it's like this. So I'm kind of really protecting my face and my head as much as I can from any kind of impact. Beyond that, if you've got the ability to control it, again, try to not go head first or feet first into the water where there's little resistance and you're going to go deep. You know, try to kind of hit the water so that you might stay on the surface a little bit, although that does then mean you'll get pushed around by the white water a little bit more. So yeah, that's maybe not the most concise and brilliant answer, but hopefully that answers the question.
Excellent. And final question then.
All right, final question.
Logan Teeple, do soft tops interact differently on a wave compared to a hard top that is the same dimensions?
Yeah. Short answer to that one. Yeah, I mean, anytime you change the materials the board's made from, it's going to change the way the board flexes. This is the biggest thing above all, is the way the board flexes. And as it flexes and springs back into shape, that's going to change the way the board feels underneath your feet. Soft tops are interesting because there are lots of different ways that people make them. If we go back to when I started surfing, the soft tops were really, they were just a block of foam, and they had very little rigidity. They could really kind of bend a lot. When I used to teach in France, we used to take these 8-foot foam boards and we'd try to pull into the shore break, and as you dropped into the wave and kind of put all your weight into the rail, the whole board would go and you could feel the whole thing flexing underneath you. A lot of the modern soft tops that you see coming out, and particularly the ones that are kind of marketed as being a bit more performancy, boards like the Catch Surf ones or the McFanning ones, they're actually fairly rigid. They've got stringers in the middle of them made of different materials. Quite often it's just, you know, like a PVC plastic stringer in the middle of the board to give it some rigidity. So when you're surfing it, you don't even necessarily notice. There was a whole line of boards that everyone thought they were soft tops, but actually it was a hard board, and they just sprayed some sort of foam rubber over the top, and it was like a millimeter thick. It wasn't a soft top at all, and they were terrible. We actually banned them at the beach I used to work at in the UK because people grabbed them and they thought, oh, it's a soft top, it's fine, and they used to let go of the boards in the water and let them go flying, and so many people were getting hit and injured by these basically hard boards with a soft rubber coating. So yeah, it really depends on what board you buy and what the construction is, and there's no uniformity to it. There are so many different companies making boards. I think I saw John posted a video the other day. It looks like he's bringing out some soft boards. Who knows? Maybe not. I don't know. But yeah, all these sort of slightly more performance ones like McFanning's and the Catch Surf ones, and there's a couple of other companies that make them as well. Like, those are a little bit more rigid, but they're still nothing like as rigid as a fiberglass surfboard. So, you know, as you go into a turn, again, if you're pushing pretty hard, you are going to feel the board flex under your feet a little bit, which it just takes some getting used to. It's not necessarily tragic. It will just, as well as the way the board flexes, it's how it springs back into position. And again, with a surfboard, with a hard top surfboard, it's not that it doesn't flex, it still does flex, but it flexes less and it springs back into position very sharply. Whereas again, these foam boards will flex a lot, and the spring back is quite kind of soft and elasticy. It's, you know, when you've got a good controlled, almost like a pop in the flex of the board, you can sort of use that to your advantage to actually generate speed and power through a maneuver. That's the original idea of the firewire boards with the rails, was that the board would kind of flex into the turn and pop out of the turn as you took the pressure off the rails.
The parabolic rails.
Yeah, the parabolic ones. With at least that was what their marketing used to say. But with a soft top board, the way it's going to flex in and spring out, it's probably going to, more than anything else, it's just going to remove power from the surfing. So, you know, unless you're a very, very good surfer and a very good wave, you're unlikely to be doing sort of real aggressive power surfing on them. But again, you know, some of these new ones that are coming out, I saw you had some boards put up.
It's called the Funformance.
Oh, I like it. I like it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so some foam top boards. So again, you know, I'm sure that they're doing something to try to make these boards surf as close as possible to a fiberglass surfboard. Our colleague Harrison, he's got a little, I can't remember who's his made by. Is
it the McFanning range, perhaps?
His might be the McFanning one. But he's got this little shortboard that he uses, and he uses it for pulling into barrels. He's just been learning to pull in big, heavy barreling waves. because he feels like there's less consequence with than pulling in with a hard board that if it snaps, it's expensive to replace, he'd be pretty upset and it's potentially going to injure him. Pulling in with this little soft board, you know, it's half the price. It's designed to flex and bend like this, so it's less likely to snap under the impact of a barreling wave. And yeah, it's very unlikely to do him any kind of injury as he pulls into these barreling waves. So he's been going out and just really building his confidence, taking off late under the lip of the waves. And yeah, it certainly from my position, you know, you can see the improvement that's had over him. So even with those performance limitations, there are still definitely benefits to taking them out.
Yeah, fantastic.
Right.
That's all we have.
Right.
Time
Yeah,
for today.
we've been here for an hour. Let us know in the comments whether you're watching this live now or you're watching this on repeat. Like, let us know in the comments. Like, did you enjoy this? Did you like this format more or less than the sort of pre-scripted ones? Should we do another one of these, or was this a little bit of a orchestrated disaster? We'd love to have your feedback. I really enjoyed this. I haven't been able to read all the comments. It looks like we've got a few, so I'm going to read through those. And yeah, thank you so much for joining us, everybody. And hopefully we'll see you again soon.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Yeah, for now, from us here in Costa